Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Abhijit Bhaduri, and I work as a talent advisor to organizations, and I also work as an executive coach. Very often, we ask this question to ourselves: what makes somebody get labeled as a thought leader other than being called a person with really smart ideas? What's the difference? How do we really explain that? And can anyone actually become a thought leader and get branded as such, not just by themselves, but by others? And to answer this question, I have with me Bill Sherman. Bill is the author, one of the three authors of the Thought Leadership Handbook. It's a book I've read and loved, and I want you to know it's right here with me on my desk. It's a fantastic book. I absolutely recommend it. And I thought I'm going to persuade Bill to be on the podcast and talk to the audience. So, Bill, without any further ado, welcome.
Abhijit, it is a joy to be here and to talk about thought leadership with you.
There are lots of people you meet who, when you talk to them, they have great ideas, and you say that, wow, I never thought about that. Is that when I start looking at them as a thought leader, where do you really start getting that label? What happens?
I would say there are more experts in the world than people who are thought leaders, right? And to be an expert, you just need to know your field, whatever it is, whether it's, say, talent management or something with, cutting edge AI engineering or whatever it is, right? Really, really, really well. You could be a world-class expert and not a thought leader, right?
Mm,
Because you're not sharing those insights with others. And that's the distinction, I think, is an expert knows their field. They can publish an academic paper. They can talk with world-class experts at a very, very high level. The thought leader is someone who is trying to take what they know, whatever their expertise is, and I'm focused mostly on business and business related skills, right? But you take those skills and you try to share your knowledge with others to help them understand so that they can create impact. The way I define thought leadership is taking ideas to scale to create impact within a specific audience. And you don't have to have a fancy title. You don't have to be a CEO. You don't have to be a founder. You can often create impact without authority.
when somebody starts having these ideas, you notice something and you kind of reflect on it and you put it in the form of a pattern. You say that I think when people do this, then this thing happens. Is
Yeah.
that the seed of thought leadership? Is that when you kind of feel that, okay, this is something I need to build depth in it, apply it to others, share it? What's the sequence of doing that?
Having worked with hundreds of people practicing thought leadership over 20 years, plus then on the podcast, we've had over 700 guests. I've had the unique position of being able to ask questions of, so how did you get into thought leadership? And amazingly, more people tell me that they stumble into it than they planned it. And I'll give you a few
Mm,
examples. One is that it's a topic or a skill that they struggle with themselves. For example, negotiation. Somebody decides negotiation is hard for them. They want to learn how to be a better negotiator. They dive in, read everything, practice, and then they have a moment where they're not just taking in information, but they're making new connections, right? That's the seed in that sort of self discovery. Other people stumble into it when someone says, oh, hey, you're smart. We need a conference speaker. Could you be on a panel? Or we need someone to write an article. Could you do that? I have a friend of mine who spent many years speaking at conferences, but really his entree into thought leadership, and he's in the book, Craig Joseph, his CEO walked down the hall past his office and said, hey, Craig, and Craig was a chief medical officer for the company. I think you should write a book. CEO continues walking down the hall, and Craig's looking and going, okay, is that a real thing? Is that something where it's just a passing idea? And then 2 weeks later, in an executive meeting, it's, so how's the book coming along? Do you have an idea for it? It's like, oh, I guess it's a real thing. It's an initiative, right? So sometimes you stumble into it. Sometimes you get a little bit of a nudge or someone asks you, and then
Mm,
other people start leaning in and want to hear more, right? You can live a good life. You can be an expert in your field and not try to share all of your ideas with an audience. But there's a subset of people who are driven to share what they know and help create impact. And that's what we focus on.
but would you say that sharing is an essential element? The reason why I ask that is today, when you look at a platform like LinkedIn, that like everybody writes, a bunch of articles. So when you look at
Right.
all of that, and a lot of it is written with AI, that's one, defining feature. If you have a great idea, but you are not very good in writing, and you write it with AI, can you still be called a thought leader?
What happens if you have great ideas, but you don't share, right? So I'll start with the story of Emily Dickinson, American poet, 19th century. Emily Dickinson is considered one of the great American poets, but she only published a handful of poems in her lifetime. She wrote hundreds, if not thousands, and she kept them. She grew up in Massachusetts. She kept them in her bedroom. She told her sister, burn my papers when I'm dead. Her sister is going through and she's seeing a bunch of letters and things, but comes across these poems, which were absolutely amazing. And her sister takes on the responsibility of the world needs to see these. She looks for publishers, she looks for editors to help with those. And it's only after she agrees to basically fund by self publishing her sister's poems with a printer in Massachusetts that they get printed and then they sell out the first day, right? And
Wow.
so if you have brilliant ideas, lock them in a chest like Emily Dickinson did with her poems, the world doesn't benefit from them. So brilliant ideas on their own aren't guaranteed to travel. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So thought leadership isn't trying to be an influencer and reach millions of people. It's about reaching a smaller population, being deeply relevant to them. And we can talk about the impact equation or the four elements of thought leadership as to what makes thought leadership, but being deeply relevant. So someone in just a few seconds when they're scrolling, and you and I both do that, we scroll through LinkedIn, we see the headlines, and there's those two words, see more. We're deciding in fractions of a second whether or not we're going to click see more. If you're practicing thought leadership right, you're not chasing after the most number of likes.
The four things, if I'm just trying to recall, I mean, there's a core idea, there's a content library, there's a market offering, and then there is what platform identity. Is that what it
Those
is?
are the four. So I was doing consulting in organizational development, helping take ideas to scale. I had a CEO level executive who'd written a business book, gotten it very well out there, sold 500,000 copies in the first year, great success. Organizations were asking, how do we take what's in the book and give some of our people some of these ideas and skills? So I was tapped to help with that project. Okay. And to really reverse engineer a book into something that would be scalable. So the first thing that I did was I went to the bookstore, I went to the library, and I looked online to see what was out there. What
Hmm.
made good thought leadership? How do you really shape it in a way that creates impact for an audience? I mean, we know that for learning and development, you've certainly been a CLO, but shaping thought leadership is a little bit different than
Yeah.
product knowledge or safety skills or any of those things, right? So I looked for a book, I looked for knowledge. I couldn't find a book that would explain how thought leadership worked. So, and having now been in the field for about 20 years, I had to create the frameworks myself, right? And my colleague and I, Peter Winnick, we started as we were working with clients and going in their intellectual attic and going through all of the things they'd written, some of which were published, some which weren't published, and really saying, hey, what about this? Oh, yeah, I worked on it over a summer. It was interesting. I'd answered the question, but did you do anything with it? No, I just sort of left it there. So we were going through the unpublished manuscript sort of things,
Mm.
similar to an Emily Dickinson, and going, oh, there's a gem here. And we had to try and figure out what made thought leadership good. How did it work? The four elements we came up with are core ideas. How do you get someone in just a few moments to tune into your idea? And a core idea needs to be provocative. We all experience plenty of signal coming at us, and we've got to choose which signals do we click see more on, right? So a core idea is provocative. It's generous. It doesn't just say there's a problem, or worse yet, you're doing it wrong. It's generous. It shows a little bit of a way forward. It's distinctive. It sounds like you. It doesn't sound like an expert. It doesn't sound like AI. So provocative, generous, distinctive, and short. Can you say it in less than 20 words? That's a core idea. Really, for thought leadership, you need 3 to 5 core ideas, and you can build a thought leadership career around those
Mhm.
if they're smart and they're evergreen.
Share your idea in 20 words. I mean, that's really tough. But when
Mm-hmm.
you do see people who have clarity, they are able to simplify a very complicated piece and just explain it in 20 words. Sometimes I see them using a metaphor, or sometimes they use
Yep.
better, they cut away all the details until the crux of the idea is there, right? That I think is powerful. So, yeah, you were talking about
Exactly.
the content library.
So if the core idea is something that gets people to say, tell me more, they're interested. The content
Okay.
library is how you respond when someone says, tell me more. It's your stories, your data, your examples, your case studies, your quotes, all of those things that in conversation or in writing or in a speech you might use to persuade someone. The core idea doesn't have to persuade. The
Mm.
content library, if it's well organized, makes it easy for you to persuade different types of audiences. So we've had clients who they're some days working with senior executives and they're doing an offsite. The language, the stories, and the examples you use there might be different and probably will be different from those from high potential leaders still figuring out where they are in their journey. The ideas don't change, the support and the proof, if you will, the examples change. Okay. Some people have a content library that's basically between their ears. They've never organized it, or it's in PowerPoints or presentations and documents and consulting projects, and details get lost. So we argue that if you're practicing thought leadership, one of the things you want to do is have a well organized content library so that when someone says, tell me more, you're not, oh, wait. There was this great quote I heard 2 years ago. Let me see if I can find it. No, you've got it at your fingertips. That's the power of thought leadership, is to be engaged with your audience in the moment and speak with them in their language, not where you are. Like you said, an expert can often be in the clouds. Can you come down to ground with someone who's a beginner. Third
Now,
of the four element. Oh, go ahead.
so
Go
I'm
ahead,
going to
Abhijit.
summarize this, just to test my understanding. So one you said is you need a core idea, and second is the content library. The image in my mind, as you were saying it, was that the core idea is, when LinkedIn, when you are scrolling, you see that core idea is the one which is written on top, which might be that you need to simplify rather than speak like an expert. Speak like a layperson, not an expert. That's your core idea. And the see
Mm-hmm.
more is the content that I saw this doctor explaining what seemed like a simple headache, and he used a huge term for it and got petrified until I realized what he meant was this. That story is the see more. That's your content library. If you have 500 examples of that, you can choose one which is most appropriate for this audience.
Yes, and it can be even more than just story. It can be a framework. It can be data or research that you've done as original research or interviews, whatever, or third party. So let me give you an applied example. One of the things that I would say that our core ideas focus on is that ideas cannot speak for themselves. You can. It's also on the front piece of our book, right? And really, I think we like all to believe that good ideas will win out and travel. And based on my experience, they don't, right? Someone has to advocate for them. That's our core idea. So, underneath that, in a content library, I can tell you the story of Emily Dickinson. That's a
Mm,
piece of my content library.
correct.
I can talk about the four elements of thought leadership. That's a framework in my content library. I can tell you about my friend Craig Joseph, who his CEO said, come write a book, right? And
Mm,
then all of those start aligning. If you have 3 to 5 core ideas, you know which pieces and stories fit best with which core ideas and which audiences. And you get a real good sense of it, right? And it's a lot easier then to communicate because you're not standing in the moment going, which one's the right one to tell?
your third idea was third element of thought leadership was around market offering. So would this
Yeah,
be like offering workshops, etc.? Is that what a market offering would be?
I define market offerings as how people encounter your ideas. How do your ideas reach people in the market? Okay.
Okay.
And I think broadly beyond whether or not money is exchanged. It could be a workshop,
Yeah.
which could be a free workshop or a paid workshop. It could be a keynote speech. It could be a book with a price tag of $30. It could be a LinkedIn post with a cost of $0. Or it could also be a podcast like we're doing now. Every time the idea goes out in a new format, it is a market offering. Okay.
Got
And
it.
so the question is, which mix of market offerings do you need to reach your audience? If your audience doesn't listen to podcasts, you can record 100 podcasts and reach no one. If you have a mix of market offerings where you say, oh, I've got a workshop that's $10,000, a keynote speech that's 25, and someone raises their hand and says, do you have anything below $10,000? No, no LinkedIn posts, no books, no articles. Come book me and I'll do a $10,000, workshop.
Mm,
That's a hard sell, right? Because just like if you and I were going online to make a purchase, we'll do a little bit of research. We want to know, as consumers of ideas, what these ideas are about. So you need a mix of price points for the idea that allow it to travel further than a price tag would. And so when I think of market offerings, I'm thinking you need about 80% free to support a 20% paid.
Platform identity.
Hmm.
Explain, is the platform identity the kind of marketplace? So am I doing a podcast? That's a kind of a platform. A book is a platform, or is it the way I come across on any platform? Is my identity which is showing? Which of these two is the definition?
Organizations have brands that we associate with, whether it's a certain car company, they have a reputation or brand, maybe fast, maybe safe, maybe reliable. And as I said, those three adjectives, you might have even had different manufacturers come to mind. Not
Right.
only do organizations have brands and their products have brands, people. We've talked about
Right.
personal branding, right? People have brands. You can be reliable. You can be insightful, clever. You can be known by your friends and colleagues as, oh, Abhijit, incredibly smart, right? And so smart, part of your brand. Here's what we've noticed is that ideas also need brands. How will
Hmm.
people talk about your ideas when you're not in the room? How did they describe them? So, someone who's encountered your idea, do they sit down with a colleague over coffee? Do they say, oh, you should talk to Abhijit because he's really smart? Or do they say, I heard Abhijit talk about this. You need to read about this idea, and here's why. The stronger the brand for the ideas, the easier it is for other people to talk about them. And
Hmm.
because we've only got 24 hours in a day, and if we're practicing thought leadership, we're probably talking about a topic we love to talk about. Okay. So it's not exhausting, but we can only reach so many people. One of the things that I look at is how do you get other people talking about your ideas? Because that's how you create scale, impact, with your audience. And then if you're trying to build revenue through your ideas, the more people who are talking about them are also then more, you have a percentage who will contact you and say, hey, I heard you talk about this. Tell me more, right?
Hmm.
So a platform identity is the brand for your ideas. And like most brands, you can influence them if it's your brand, but you can't control it. It's not
Right.
how you want to be, it's others. So the ideas get defined. You can shape and influence a little bit, and you can suggest how you want people to understand them. But at the end of the day, it's how people either talk about them or not. Most people who practice thought leadership underinvest in the concept of a brand for their ideas. And so we see one of two things happen. Either that brand runs and attaches itself to the person who created it, and the ideas are sort of conflated with the person,
Right.
or they're conflated with the organization that they came from, one of the big consulting houses or whatever. It's go talk to McKinsey or go talk to this person, right? But there's a difference between having an idea like blue ocean strategy, right? Red ocean, blue ocean. People can talk about that. Psychological safety. You don't need to know who Amy Edmondson is or have read her work to be in a meeting, to hear that word and have an idea of what it means. Now, clearly, Amy Edmondson wants her work attributed and credited, but at the same time, it has a strong brand that has exceeded her brand.
A lot of times you see people when they are considered thought leaders, they get associated with one big idea. They might have had three, four, five big ideas, and all of them are precious, but we somehow tend to ascribe one particular piece of work and we say everything about that person is just that one idea. Is that a good thing to happen, or does it mean that your strongest, descriptor is that idea, and the rest are, secondary or maybe minor descriptors? Is that what it is? Because one definition of personal brand that I like to use is to say, this is how people describe you when you are not in the room. So when you are not
Exactly.
the
And
one sharing the idea, is that what it is?
that's exactly what I'm saying for a brand for your ideas, your platform identity. How do they describe your ideas and which ones do they choose when you're not in the room, right? I have a number of different frameworks in the book. Do they talk about any of those? Which ones do they pick? That would be how our brand for thought leadership will be developed. It's not as much what I say. Yeah, I can talk about the four elements or the impact equation or the five avatars of thought leadership. What sticks with the audience and what do they talk about? Now, to your point on having individuals known for one big idea, I think there's a piece of very human behavior in this. And here's why I say that is pick your favorite musician. If they go on tour, there's probably one or two songs that you want them to play, and you're disappointed if they don't play one of their classics, right? And so even if they have new material, you want to make sure that they play that song that the crowd wants, right?
I was actually reminded of, some time back, I went to hear a concert by the Eagles. It was their farewell tour, and it was in
Mm-hmm.
Vegas. And when you go there, everybody's like, and it wasn't just me. I spoke to a bunch of people there, which is the one song you hope that they will play. And everybody universally says Hotel California. Now, we've heard that a million times. And
Right.
yet you want them to talk about it, which actually is an interesting question that comes up, that when you share your ideas online, and I've seen a lot of people go through with that they share the best ideas, they're giving it away free, and yet people call them back to play Hotel California again. You can listen to
Mm-hmm.
it as many times without paying the ticket price. So why do people go to watch that?
There's a paradox on whether it's putting a song out into the world, right? That could be heard over the radio. And if you have a radio, it's essentially free, right?
Yep,
Spotify or whatever, right? You could buy the album, CD, whatever collector's copy, or you could go to the Sphere and hear them play live, right?
true.
And
Yep,
so, again, if we think about it from a marketing offering perspective, there's a range between casual listener or even a super fan on a day where they don't want to spend, top dollar. And then the time where they're like, I want the VIP pass. I want to be in the front row when they play Hotel California.
Bill, what a change of perspective you've created for me. And I will once again tell all my viewers and listeners, this is a terrific book. I loved it. And I think you will value the insights that are there, the frameworks which are there. And thank you so much. I so appreciate your being here. Goodbye.
Thank you.